Welcome to another edition of Wildcat Country. Eric Cohen and Shane Dale, and we had it good for a while. Things were very easy, a lot of wins, everything like that, Shane. And then lately, it's been a struggle. The men's team has not been great. Let's be honest.
The basketball team was never supposed to lose again, and the football team was supposed to never lose again. I mean, they haven't lost technically yet, but they did lose their coach.
Yeah,
and so
players.
Yeah.
Certain players. Yeah.
I mean, everything is fine. Like, it's fine to vicariously live through 19 and 20-year-old kids as long as they keep winning and stay. And if they would just do that, we wouldn't have any problems. But they only think of themselves, don't they?
That's why we do this show. People have asked me, why do you do Wildcat Country? It's cathartic. When there are losses, we can suffer with each other, right? And when there are wins, we can celebrate with each other. And I think that's the fun part about doing the show with you and interacting with people on Twitter or the YouTube comments or whatever in between, And
when we win, I can continue to be a wet blanket, which everyone loves and appreciates.
I think we're all excited to hear about your wet blanketness, presumably.
Wet blanketness.
Yes, I just made up a term. So the new Big 12 football schedule for 2024 came out today. And Shane and I will talk about it, but we will also be joined by our friend Blair Willis, used to work in the athletic department. He can speak on a lot of different topics. So really curious to get his feedback in segment number 2. But let us start with our first segment, the first part of our first segment, and that is Shane's standouts / grievances. What do you got?
Well, it's going to be a real short list this week. I know we have other sports we can talk about, but everyone's talking about obviously Caleb Love's performance against Oregon, and for good reason. But shout out to Kylan Boswell, because at least for this game, he was back. And I've been adamant on social media and otherwise saying that as Kylan Boswell goes, so goes this team. I mean, you look at the two games that Arizona, the previous two Arizona losses at Washington State, at Oregon State. Do you know how many total points he had in those games?
0.
Big fat 0. He had five points combined in their 3 conference losses. All he has to do is, get double digits, shoot reasonably well, not turn the ball over, contribute on both sides of the ball, and they win. It really, I mean, I know that there's more to it than that. Certainly 3-point defense is a problem. I saw the stat that they're I think the 8th worst team in the Pac-12 on defense in road games so far this year.
That's good to know. Yeah.
Free throw shooting.
That's comforting. Yeah.
Free throw shooting overall has been a problem. So they have other issues, switching out on defense and everything, but they can overcome a lot of deficiencies as long as Kylan Boswell plays well. And so he is going to be my lone standout for the week, because in an effort, in hopes that we send him some good vibes and he keeps it rolling.
Boy, I'll tell you, that dude for Oregon State on Thursday night looked like Steph Curry hitting fadeaway threes. Listen, I mean, that loss to Oregon State's inexcusable. We're not going to sit here and defend it. But they were down 9 with 3.5 minutes left, somehow tied the game, and then give up. It wasn't like it was bad defense. Dude hit a Curry-like shot, and that's why he was the National Player of the Week, because he was great against the Arizona schools. So there's no excuse, though. It was a terrible loss. But we're going to start talking football, and this is By Yourself, presented by our friends at Ice Shaker. Go to iceshaker.com. Use promo code Wildcat Country, capital W, capital C, and get $5 off your first purchase. By the way, when you do so, check out the post-purchase survey. Mention Wildcat Country, and Shane and I will be very, very happy that you did so. So we'll stick with that. All right. Tuesday here when we're recording, earlier in the day, the Big 12 schedule makers put out a schedule, including Arizona's. Shane, number 1, the Big 12 schedule makers did Arizona solid this season, with the exception of, I would say, the 2 Utah road games in a 3-week span in October. Late September, early October. Yeah.
I don't know. I'm kind of iffy on it. I mean, we already knew that they avoided some of the actual tougher teams in the conference, Oklahoma State and the Kansas schools. We have to include Kansas as a tougher team now, which is kind of crazy to think about, but here we are. Kansas and Arizona are both good at football. At least they were last season.
Yeah.
And they have the 2 byes in there, so they're getting the week 0 game against New Mexico.
No, it's actually not week 0.
It's not a week 0 game. They're getting 2 byes anyway.
Yeah, there's an extended season. There's more regular season weeks.
Okay.
Every few years it happens this way. So no, there's no week 0.
Shows how much I'm paying attention. Okay. Well, they get 2 byes regardless. One thing I don't like, and it's something that I think Blair Willis, our soon-to-be guest, noted, is that he likes to look at the teams like the week before and the week after for every team that Arizona plays, and three of the teams Arizona plays get a bye before they play Arizona. So that's kind of tough. I think both
I think that's an overrated stat. An
I
overrated
don't
fact.
know. I don't know.
I would have to see, and maybe Blair will know, but I don't know it offhand. Does that really make a difference? I mean, I don't know.
It would be interesting to go dive in statistically and see that,
Yeah,
because we
I don't know.
talk about, oh, they're fresh, they're coming off a bye, but does it really make a difference? I suspect it does, at least a little bit. But that's a fair point. And the other observation I'll just make real quick is I think we just assumed that Arizona ASU would continue to be the last game of the season, but it was confirmed, which was good, that it will continue to be the final game of the regular season, which I think it should. You and I have discussed this before. I know you're not as big on that. I would prefer that it would be on the day after Thanksgiving as opposed to
Yeah, I
2 days
agree.
after.
You know what,
But
Shane? I'll be honest with you. I hate to agree with you. No, I'm just kidding.
no,
I
that's
thought
fair.
this.
That's
I
fair.
thought the same thing. I looked at it and I was kind of depressed. Not depressed, but like bummed that it was on a Saturday. I was really hoping it'd
Mm.
be on a Friday. So yeah, I'm with
Yeah.
you there. That's good.
Yeah.
That's a good
But,
take.
but I,
Yeah.
but my preference is Friday during the day, the second best Saturday during the
Yeah.
day. That would be a day game. There's no, I mean, you're going to have football in the state of Arizona in November. Put it during the day, please.
Yeah, I mean, I would rather it not be a night game. You know, listen, I love to watch Michigan, Ohio State, or whatever rivalry games are on. I'd rather it not be a cold night game. It'll probably be a mid-afternoon game once again, especially if Arizona is ranked at the time. All right, speaking of that, Shane, I went and gave a brief analysis on Twitter of my record predictions. I said, all right, best case scenario, not including, assuming no good injury health, no big players hurt for a while, Arizona goes 10-2. I think the road trips at Kansas State, at Utah, at UCF is concerning. TCU if they bounce back, and there's always a random home game. So I would say, in there,
That's right. They
you're
do
gonna,
play Kansas State. I was thinking they got the non-conference at Kansas State, so they do have to
yeah.
go to Kansas for that one.
Yeah, I mean, but that game, for the most part, doesn't really affect Arizona's standing in the Big 12 this year. It's dumb
It
that
could
either
affect
side
college football
canceled it.
playoff ranking if it comes down to it.
Okay, fair. With that said, all right. So best case 10-2, Arizona wins. All their games at home, loses 2 games on the road. Fair enough. I think that worst case scenario 7-5. Maybe there's some injuries and whatnot, but I think this schedule sets up for at least 7 wins. I think realistic 8-4. I think you're going to lose some games on the road. You'll probably lose a game you shouldn't at home, and you get 8 wins and we're somewhat happy, I guess, all things considered, in the first year of the Brent Brennan era. You probably will disagree with that. Go for it.
Oh yeah. No, I think the two things that concern me. And first of all, I'll just say again, I think the Brent Brennan hire was a good one. I think he's done a great job retaining a lot of talent from last season. I think he's brought in a good coaching staff, which I know we'll talk about. But there are two big things that concern me. Number one is all the talent they've lost on defense. On offense,
Okay.
they've retained a lot. Jonah Coleman was the big loss there, and then some guys are graduating, which there's nothing you can do about that. But offensively, they're going to retain a lot of the same guys, and they're going to be in pretty good shape at the offensive line, at quarterback, at wide receiver. We'll see about tailback. On defense,
They'll be fine. You can find running backs, Shane. I mean, come on.
I agree, but Jonah Coleman was special last year.
He was good, but you still
7 yards a carry.
Okay, but fine. I'll give you that. But he didn't. I don't think he did much in the Alamo Bowl, and he still won the game anyways.
No, that's true. I'm not saying he's irreplaceable. I'm just saying that it's a loss. But
And the
overall,
ASU game, same thing. Yeah.
all right. Just relax.
Okay.
All right. On the defensive side, they've lost a lot, and they've lost a lot of depth already before Jetfish left, and they've lost even more since then. On the defensive line, the cornerback position, the defensive line, we saw Traden Stukes and Gunnar Maldonado and Dalton Johnson announced they're coming back, but they've lost a lot. And I think that Arizona, not just their starters, but their depth, their reserves on defense, helped build that unit tremendously. So they're not going to have to do a full rebuild, but a pretty big rebuild on the defensive side of the ball, which, hey, strong on offense, weak on defense. They fit in perfectly with the Big 12. The other concern of mine is just it's more than an intangible. And I think it's just going to take a little bit of time for the players and the staff to get to know each other. This is a completely different staff, and the staff needs to get to know them and vice versa. And it's going to take time to do that. And so the chemistry of the team is just an unknown. It wasn't going to be an issue with Jetfish return. So all those things considered, I think
give me
your
worst case, your best case, and your realistic.
Oh, I mean, I look at best case if everything comes together and they land some great players in the transfer portal, which they still can the next time around. Then I guess I'm with you at 10 wins at best,
Okay.
absolute best
Okay.
case.
Best case. Okay.
But I think the floor is a lot lower. I think worst case things can fall apart and they win maybe 5 games.
Oh,
I would
wow.
I would say I would put them at maybe 7 right now, maybe 8. I think, and I even think that's optimistic. And I guess I'm also just being careful because, and this has nothing to do with the current team, but it's just how I think. When Rich Rodriguez was fired and Kevin Sumlin was brought in, I thought they were going to have a great first year with Kevin Sumlin because they brought back a lot of talent on that team.
Hmm.
I thought
Hmm.
they might win 9 games and they won 5. And I think the transition was part of that issue. It's going from the in your face Rich Rodriguez to more of the laid back Kevin Sumlin and his staff. I think was kind of a shock to the team system. That's what concerns me a little bit about this team. Plus, just all the guys they've lost on defense. And until I feel confident that they've replenished the roster on defense, I'm not prepared to be quite as optimistic as you are.
All right. So obviously injuries not built in here.
Yeah.
If there's bad injury luck, all right, it's one thing. Obviously Fafita goes down, T-Mac goes down, whatnot. I still think this team. I think the expectations from some fans are just unrealistic. I think right now, considering the coaching change, as you mentioned, Shane, to say that Arizona's going to go win 10 games automatically or go 12-0, at this point in time, as the roster stands, I don't think it's fair to say that.
Yeah.
I think an 8-win team, if Arizona won 8 games and was a true contender in the Big 12 to make the championship game until the end of the season, I think that's fine. I'm
Yeah.
not going to complain about that. I mean, this was unfortunately, if Arizona had a chance this year with the Pac-12, if the South Division didn't, if they didn't get rid of divisions, Arizona's playing Washington in the Pac-12 championship game, and we're going to see what they're made of.
Yeah.
But at this point in time, I expect an 8-win season. If assuming good health, if Arizona fails to win 8 games next year with this schedule, I'm disappointed.
I'll tell you what.
Another thing,
Yeah. No, I just want to mention real quick that their opening conference game at Utah. That's going
I
to
mean,
be
it's
huge,
tough,
and we're going to
right?
learn a lot about that team going in.
But
Yep.
but Shane, you look at the schedule this year. I mean, you had that murderer's row. Obviously, you started with
Oh yeah.
Stanford, and then you played Washington, USC it was at USC at Washington State. Then you had 6 ranked teams in a row at one
Mm-hmm.
point in the year. Then
Mm-hmm.
Colorado fell off. Washington State obviously ended
Yep.
up not being that good. But I mean, this schedule on paper is significantly worse than what Arizona faced this year.
No, it's not.
Significantly.
It's not. Doesn't look terribly daunting, but again, it's those. It's less the schedule and more the concerns I have. Both in intangibles and otherwise with this team that have me a little less optimistic than you are going
All
into the
right,
year.
fair. The other thing about this schedule I want to talk about, the teams on it, when you look at it from the eye test, it's just
Yeah.
not, it just doesn't stand. I mean, we can all agree. Like, you're missing the USC's, UCLA's, Oregon's. There's nobody on here where you're like, I gotta be at this West Virginia game, even though it'll probably be homecoming. I mean, Colorado, maybe if you want to see Dion in Tucson, and ASU, of course. But like, there's nobody that is like, oh my gosh, what an incredible opponent, you know?
Yeah. Well, and that's true. But on the flip side, when we talked about this before the schedule was released and when Jed Fish was still the head coach, there's no one on that schedule where you look at and think Arizona can't beat. And I still think that's true. I mean, you look at if Arizona is as good as I think they're going to be, or at least as good as you think they're going to be, there's no reason they won't have a chance to win every single game on that schedule. The Utah game, I think, is probably the toughest on the outside looking in. Then maybe the Kansas State game after that. But I understand what you're saying, though. But with that said, I mean, Arizona's attendance last year was all. I mean, the Washington game sold out, and I think that was it. Not even the UCLA game sold out.
Yeah, I mean, obviously attendance is going to be tough, especially if they're going to raise prices up the
Mm,
wazoo. And we don't know
yeah,
what I don't know what that's going to look like. I haven't seen my season ticket renewal, which I probably will here soon. How much are things going to go up? The team was good, but then you lost your head coach. So
yeah,
you had this great momentum, and well, you kept some of it while keeping your players. You've also lost others. So can you charge a premium for those tickets? Let me see what that is, and we'll talk about that. Because I haven't seen them. Maybe they are raising the prices, whatnot, and we'll go to that. All right. Number 2, Shane, based on seeing how Brent Brennan assembled his coaching staff, the new coaching staff is more impressive on paper than the last.
um, maybe in terms of like overall college resume, maybe. I think the big advantage of the previous staff, number one, I think that there was a good deal of NFL experience on there, and number two, I think you're going to keep Dwayne Keenan. You had to make him the defensive coordinator. I get
Yeah.
that, but I kind of liked him more in the role that he was in before. I think he was more valuable in that role. I don't know. I'm not sold on him as a defensive coordinator. I think it was a good move. I like it.
Interesting.
Well, I feel like his first run as defensive coordinator at Arizona was just okay. He wasn't the DC during the Desert Swarm era. It was after that. So I feel like he might be a little bit better suited in this previous role. So that concerns me a little bit. But certainly you have a lot of experience. He has a lot. Brent Brennan has a lot of guys he knows he's been able to bring with him from San Jose State and guys he's worked with previously on both coordinators, obviously. So. Oh no! Overall, I like it. I like what he's done, but I think that Jedd Fisch put together a great staff of guys who could just go out and sell the program. And until I see that with these guys, it's kind of hard for me to put him on par with that group.
Okay, so from a recruiting standpoint, you're right. I think Jedd Fisch's staff was better. You had guys that were hungrier. I think with this particular staff, you have the former head coach of Syracuse, former Arizona assistant. He understands what it takes to win here. Dino Babers, I think he's a big time football mind and a great hire. And I think Danny Gonzalez, former ASU defensive coordinator, San Diego State defensive coordinator, New Mexico head coach. Maybe not a great head coach, but he's a great assistant to Dwayne Akina out there. So I really like. I think the staff is older. And you got Zoe Carter, who's the running backs coach, who's known as an excellent recruiter. Jedd really busted it as far as recruiting went. Like Jedd was phenomenal at that and selling the program. It's going to be hard for this staff to do that. With that said, they have to get they have to get a pipeline like Jedd did with the Servite kids, and that's the reason Arizona's as good as they are. You got Fafita, McMillan, Manu, those three guys right there are the reason Arizona's as good as they are. Quite simply. And so you have to find that pipeline. So I think from a recruiting perspective, I don't expect Arizona to be maybe as accomplished as Jedd Fisch was. With that said, I think as far as X's and O's, I don't think Jedd, and we talked about this, Shane, I didn't think Jedd Fisch calling plays was like a savant.
Yeah. I think he was a very good play caller. I think he wasn't quite as smart as he thought he was.
I agree.
I think go ahead.
No, I think you nailed it right there. It's a good take.
Yeah, I think, especially the first season, he was calling plays. In the first year he was at Arizona when they went 1-11. He was calling plays for guys who weren't nearly as talented as the guys he had on the field, thinking that they could pull it off. And then later on, he started getting there. He still got too cute sometimes, trying to do these trick plays that he absolutely didn't need to throw in. I think it's fair still to be critical of him for that decision on that 2-point play against USC to run the ball, but it's hard to second guess.
How about not go for 2 to win the game earlier? Yeah. I mean if Arizona wins that game, Shane, Arizona's 10-2 and they're in a New Year's Six bowl game. I mean, that was one play. It came down to one play. Yeah. Not to tie the game, but to win the game.
I agree. No, I agree with you 100%. It was the same thing as the Oregon game back in 2009. So, yeah, in terms of play calling, I don't think Arizona – I'm not terribly concerned about that. I think Arizona's going to be fine in that regard. But in terms of recruiting, we'll have to see. And I think one of the big selling points, again, is come to Arizona and we'll help you get to the NFL. We'll help you be a higher draft pick. We'll help you be a draft pick. You'll get to hear from some of the best coaches in the country who Jedd has connections to. And – Brent Brennan and his staff just don't have that, at least not yet. And so that's not that selling point. You can now sell, thanks partly to Jedd Fisch and his staff, you can sell the idea that you can come and win at Arizona, which is a big deal. But I think that really is secondary for most college athletes who are want to go somewhere where they can be trained up to play at the next level, which I think is totally fair. And I think Jedd Fisch's staff definitely had an advantage, at least at this point, over Brent Brennan's staff.
All right. This one, you're probably going to roll your eyes when, obviously you've seen the questions in advance, but I think those of you out there probably are thinking like me. A bonus football question: that you will root against Washington next year more than ASU, or I guess as long as Jedd and players like Prysock are there. And Prysock with the buy my jerseys, oh yeah, I'm leaving anyways, doesn't really matter. That was not a great look. I
Yeah.
wish him well, but it's hard to root for him after that. I thought it was a garbage move.
Well, let's talk about that for just a second because yeah, he goes out and peddles his Arizona jersey, knowing he was
Mhm.
on his way out, and then
Yeah.
announces it a couple days later. Then he says something about, "Oh, by the way, I don't make any money off of that." A day or two after that, well, first of all, someone pointed out that it even says online NIL jersey. Okay, so
Hmm.
that's number one. And then a couple days after that, a Leaf Magnuson, offensive lineman, goes out and says, "You buy my jersey, and 100% of the proceeds for the next however long are going to go to a children's hospital."
Class
So
act. Class
yeah,
act.
which
Yeah.
tells you that he's seen some of that money. So that was just I mean, it was a classless thing for him to do, and then he lied about it. Ephesians
Yeah.
price lock is what I'm talking about. So,
Yeah.
so I don't begrudge him the opportunity to go play somewhere else. He wants to do that. That's just fine. But he I think was absolutely classless on the way out. With that said, I I would take a certain satisfaction in Washington not doing well.
Yeah.
Absolutely, I would. Um, and with ASU, it's like I'm I'm officially not I'm not an ASU hater. I never have been. Look, when it comes to the rivalry, I want to be the best. I want to have the best program in the state. I want to beat them like Matt. I want to beat them in territorial cup. Don't get me wrong, but I don't have that disdain week in week out for ASU like some fans do. So I'm not, but I also am not going to put Washington on par with that. Yes, I will take some satisfaction if Washington does not do well, and or if he does well, they do well and he leaves after 1 year. I would probably enjoy that just as much.
All right.
But I wouldn't put it on par with the ASU rivalry.
Oh, I see. Listen. I somewhat agree with you here. ASU is still my least favorite school in the country. I think most of you would agree with that. But if Washington isn't number two, especially this year, I'm just saying. There's none. I would be if you're rooting for Washington this year and wish them well. Let us know. I mean, put it in the YouTube comments and put it on X and say, you know what? I hope Jed does well at Washington because I'm not there. I hope he loses. And I hope, I don't wish anybody ill will. I just don't want him to win games.
Yeah,
That's all. He got his money. Great. And I want him to leave for Florida. I think it'd be funny. So I will be
yeah,
rooting against
I agree.
Washington. I don't care who's playing Washington. I will be rooting against them. And fortunately, they don't play ASU, so I won't have to worry about that. And I doubt ASU will make a bowl game, so I won't have to think about that. But as far as it goes, ASU at the bottom, Washington one step above. All right, let's talk a little bit about basketball. Shane, we've talked about the UConn last year with they lost 6 of 8 in January, and then figured it out and won the national championship. So I'll put it this way about Arizona: that the January slide is temporary, and Arizona will improve in the final 2 months.
I'll buy that. Yeah, I think despite everything in the last several weeks and the ridiculousness of some of these losses and performances, and I'm going to include UCLA because they really had to
Mm-hmm.
dig themselves out of a hole at home against UCLA.
Yeah.
My mind still hasn't changed about this team. Is that they can beat anyone when they're on, and they can lose to anyone when they're off. I do think one thing we've learned is that they rise to a challenge better. Like they need fans screaming at them on the road, not just a couple thousand golf clap fans that can maybe get loud late in the game, like at Oregon State or in Pullman, but fans that are really going to get after them from the first jump ball at center court, the tip off. That's what term I was trying to think of. The tip off. So like against Duke or against Oregon, and I think maybe even when they play ASU later on in Tempe, they crave that adversity. And when they go into lukewarm environments, they just don't perform as well. It's not an excuse. They should still win.
Mm-hmm.
And then they have won a couple of those games, like against Cal, they didn't have that problem. And against Oregon State, they started off just fine. But I think that there's that part of it. And then if you think, okay, Pac-12 tournament, NCAA tournament, that's not going to be an issue in terms of playing on the road. It won't be a true road game. It does concern me a little bit that the first round of the tournament where it's not quite as loud and a lot of the fans will get behind the lower seat. It actually concerns me a little bit more that they might not be able to climb out of a hole against a bad team in the first or second round. But I think that they can rise to the challenge. They can beat anyone on any given day. They've proven they can lose to anyone on any given day. And what happened in Oregon, even though it was backwards from what we both thought it would be, hasn't changed my mind about anything.
All right. One thing that I kind of learned from all this, I'm not saying it's temporary, but I want to see Arizona bounce back this week. Take care of business against the Northern California schools. You're on the road at the Rocky Mountain schools next week.
Always tough.
That's going to be a tough trip. I think you got to get at least one there. But one thing that I kind of learned, after the Oregon State loss, I was thinking, oh, there's no way they beat Oregon. And then the odds makers came out with Arizona -4.5, and you're like, well, what do they know that I don't? I'm taking Oregon on the money line. As I always like to say, the casinos are so big in Las Vegas for a reason, and the hotels are so big because
you want to know a secret, Eric? So I don't gamble, as you know, but for the first time in about 6 or 7 months, I said, you know what? If Arizona's just going to lose, I'm going to go ahead and bet against them and make some money. So I bet $5 that are on the not the money line, but with the points. And so at least, hey, I'm fine with that. And if that's what it takes for Arizona to keep winning, I'm going to keep doing it. I said, if Arizona's going to keep losing like this, because I almost did it against Oregon State, and I wish I had, because that 18.5 point line was ridiculous.
Yeah.
So I did it against Oregon, and of course it didn't pay off. But I'm fine with that, and I might have to keep doing it as long as Arizona wins.
All right, let's talk about the number of wins for the remaining true road games, not including the Pac-12 tournament or the NCAA tournament. Predict the number of wins for Arizona over these last 5 games, Shane. At Utah, at Colorado, at ASU, at UCLA, at USC. How many you got?
Yeah, so, and before I get into that, Arizona at this point always changes, has an opportunity for just 2 more quad 1 wins in the regular season, and those are the Mountain West schools, because it's a top 75 net
the
team
Mountain
on
schools,
the road.
not Mountain West, but
Mountain, excuse me, Mountain schools. Yeah. Sorry, I'm thinking Oregon State and Washington State.
Yeah.
So yeah, a split there I think would be okay, but those are their last 2 chances for quad 1 wins as of now. And then there's ASU, UCLA, and USC where you're more just trying to dodge landmines. I think 3 out of 5. I would be okay with a split at the mountain schools. I think as well as ASU's been playing at home, I think that just that kind of environment we talked about, where there's always a lot of U of A fans of that game, and that just gets the ASU fans even louder because they want to defend their home court. I think that they would probably win that game. And then just based on the way the teams are playing right now, I think they would beat USC and probably lose at UCLA. So 3 out of 5.
Yeah, you know what? I agree with everything you just said. Spot on. And I thought, I was expecting you to say 1 or 2. If you were to say right now, what seed is Arizona come the big dance?
Well, as of right now, and there's a great site called bracketmatrix.com that I love going to. It's a compilation of all the bracket projections on the web everywhere. And the latest one, which I think came out on Monday, still has Arizona as a 2 seed, which is maybe a little bit surprising, but a lot of other teams have been losing too, so that's part of it. I would guess, if I had to put a number on it, I would guess a 3, and give or take a seed, because I think they're probably going to suffer a couple more losses. And they are, one of the things against them, even though they have a lot of really quality wins, they're the only team in the top 12 right now in net to have a quad 3 loss. And that could change also by the end of the season. But so I will predict 3, give or take 1.
Yeah, I don't think Arizona's higher than a 3, and I think a 4 seems about right to me. So I'm gonna be a little more pessimistic. You're gonna, if you lose even 2 more games, and let's say if you win the Pac-12 tournament, yeah, I could see a 3. If you don't win the Pac-12 tournament, a 4. I'd see right around there. One of those 2 seeds, I think you're right. I'd be surprised if they got a 2 at this point. I think the Oregon State game really, unless they were to go on a winning streak and pretty much win like 10 in a row here, which I don't probably see happening. I'd say a 2 is probably out of the question at this point. As far as I'm concerned, realistically. All right, coming up next, let us talk to Blair Willis, get his thoughts on everything that's happening inside the Arizona Athletic Department here on Wildcat Country.
What's up, Wildcat Country? Chris Gronkowski here, and I'm at the Ice Shaker Warehouse, the proud sponsor of the Wildcat Country podcast. And I got something new and exciting to show you. We're talking about the 4D printed University of Arizona shaker bottles with the Legacy Championships on it. Check it out now at iceshaker.com.
Shane, it's been a long time since we've had our buddy Blair Willis on, former SID for the Arizona football team, among other jobs with the U of A. Blair, glad to have you back on. And if there's anybody that understands the inner workings of an athletic department that we ever have on this program, it's you. Let's just start with the Jed Fish leaving Brent Brennan hire. Do you like the hire? Do you like the staff he's put together? And your thoughts on the overall, what the last few weeks have been like with that football team?
Yeah, Eric, thanks for having me, guys. It's great to be back with you. So much has happened since the last time I joined you back in football season. The coaching change was, one of those things that I think we all thought was going to come with Jed at some point. This is probably at least a year early from what many of us hoped for. But, I really thought the U of A administration did a great job moving quickly. And, when the era of the transfer portal and kind of unlimited transfers, you got to move quickly on these things. And I was very impressed with what the Arizona administration was able to do in going out and getting Brent Brennan. He's certainly a guy I've been very, very high on. He was probably, if I had a short list of names back when Jed was hired, Brent was probably at the top of my list back in 2020. Just the type of personality and just coaching background and acumen that he has. I just think that's something that our program is needed. And, to Jed's credit, I thought Jed did a great job connecting with alumni, engaging this community. It took a little bit of time for the community to come around and support Jed and his program. But once we started winning some games last fall, there was a lot of energy around the football program. And it really makes Brent Brennan's job in the short term probably a little bit easier now coming in, because a lot of those relationships with alumni have been built and re-engaged, and even a little bit of edginess now, I think, to some Arizona football fans. We haven't always had edginess, but I think there's been some hostility towards the way Jed exited, and maybe that's a good thing to kind of rally the troops and get everybody behind Coach Brennan and his staff. And, you asked me, Eric, what I think about the staff. I think he's done a really good job, with the staff. He's brought a few people over with him from San Jose State who he's going to feel good about, not just in who they coach at their positions, but probably the recruiting connections that they're going to have along the West Coast, which I think will be important. I was elated that Coach Aquina was going to remain a part of the defensive staff, whatever role that was going to be. And so then to see him as the defensive coordinator, that tells me two things. One, that he's energized and ready to be the defensive coordinator again. I think some of us may have thought when he first came here as a senior analyst last spring that maybe he was at the end of his career and just kind of, trying to find a place to retire. But the way the defense responded last year to Coach Nanson's coaching and Coach Aquina's coaching, I think there's a fire there, not only amongst those players, but in Coach Aquina. So I'm glad he's on board. If I have one criticism, and it's not really a criticism of Brent's staff, I do have a question mark a little bit at offensive coordinator with Coach Babers coming back. Maybe falls a little bit along the question I had with Coach Aquina a year ago. Does he really want to be a coordinator at this point of his career? And what's his offense going to look like? How's it going to match the personnel that Arizona has coming back? Because with the offensive linemen returning, with Noah Fafita, Tedero McMillan, some of the other young wide receivers, there's some talent to work with on that side of the ball. And I'm going to be very interested to see how Coach Babers and the offensive staff piece this thing together. Because if there was one thing Jed did well, it was install a pro-style offensive system here that was executed at a very high level, really at every position that we had this past year. So that's going to be hard to replace, but I'm optimistic they can do that.
Yeah, that was one of my thoughts as well, Blair, is that if the assistant coach or the coach on Brennan's staff who might leave the soonest might be Babers, just because I'm sure he's angling for another head coaching job. And Arizona does well. He could get another group of 5 offer as soon as next year. But trying to read between the lines a little bit on Jed's exit, I feel like he probably wanted to stay, but the contract extension wasn't getting done. And this, typically when you agree to a contract extension, it's announced by the media, by the athletic department. It's pending ABOR approval. And this time it didn't happen. And I wonder, maybe there was concern that the Board of Regents wasn't going to approve it, or was going to maybe table it because of the optics with the budget shortfall. And Jed said, maybe I just need to get out of here and take the sure thing with Washington, which is offering me more money anyway. What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I'm certainly not privy to, really where things stood with the extension. I mean, just based on some third-hand knowledge, it sounded like there was an agreement in place, and even kind of an acknowledgement that because of some optics with the university's overall financial picture, that I think both sides were willing to kind of put it off a little bit and maybe get it a little bit closer to the February signing date or the start of spring ball. So I think there was a pretty good understanding and agreement there. I really just think that Jed, when the opportunity came so quickly, I mean, that it really did develop quickly that week where Coach Saban retired. Greg Byrne in Alabama moved very quickly on Kalen DeBoer from Washington. It became one of those opportunities, maybe with Washington's familiarity with Coach Fish on the West Coast, that it was such a natural fit and such an opportunity, and how quickly it came, that Jed really probably had a place like that in mind that he'd want to get to. And he probably didn't think it was going to be as quick as it was, or certainly that maybe at the end of November after Arizona won the Territorial Cup, he wasn't thinking Washington's going to be available this year. It just maybe didn't seem like the right time or the right opportunity. But when it came available a few weeks back, I just think he probably had to make a very quick decision. It's hard to turn down that money, basically doubling your salary, not just your salary, but your coaching staff, everybody that comes with you, a lot of your support staff that you're going to bring. I mean, that's really a life-changing opportunity for a lot of people beyond just Coach Fish. The other thing I would say to it is, and we'll probably get to this if we talk a little bit about 2024 Arizona football. Arizona's coming off a 10-3 season, beating out Oklahoma in the Alamo Bowl. It's probably one of the top 5 best seasons in school history, maybe even as high as the 3rd best season in school history. How likely was Arizona to recreate that success again next year?
Strike while the iron's hot.
Going to the Big 12.
Yeah.
And so, if Jed, would be concerned about a setback and the program taking a step back, he might be, is he in the mix for Florida next year if that's open? Is he in the mix for a Washington type job next year if it becomes available? I really think for Coach Fish, it just became you got to strike while the iron's hot. And I think he probably took a couple missteps on his way out in terms of how cordial he was and really being gracious on his exit. But I don't really fault him for taking the position itself. I think he could have handled it with a little more grace, though.
Yeah, I think most Wildcat fans would agree with you on that. All right, let's transition to Dave Heeke. I think we were all kind of caught off guard when we saw that news. Your thoughts on the decision and just your overall thoughts on Dave Heeke as you got to know him when you were working with him in the athletic department.
Yeah, probably the timing of that was a little bit surprising. I guess that was last week. I was actually thinking about, I don't have much of a relationship with Dave, and I've been out of the athletic department for almost 5 years now, but I would see Dave typically once or twice a year at football games up in the press box, and he was always, great with me. And I was actually thinking about reaching out to him because I thought they did a great job, a fantastic job with the Coach Brennan hire and moving so quickly and making that a very seamless transition, making it easy on our student athletes to make their decisions, whether, a few of them have gone into the portal and maybe committed elsewhere, but a great majority of our roster has stayed here. And so I just thought Dave in particular had done a really good job on this coaching change in keeping a lot of stability. But looking at Dave's tenure as the athletic director over what I think was just about 7 years, I really think you kind of look at it in a couple different contexts. I mean, the first context is he came here at a time of presidential turmoil back in 2017. There was a lot of criticism of President Ann Weaver Hart. She had announced that she was going to leave at the end of her contract. And so we were in the midst of a presidential search when Dave was hired. I think some people may even forget that Dave was actually hired before President Robbins officially started. And so I think the early part of Dave's tenure was a little bit rough for him. And I think it may have created a little bit of friction amongst different facets of people, whether that was people working in athletics, whether that was donors, boosters, people in the community, because you had a few things working, against him taking the time to do what he wanted to do as the athletic director. One was he had a new president coming in that summer, the summer of 2017. Eventually, you get the basketball sanctions and the allegations of the FBI investigation. Then you have a investigation into the head football coach. Much of that became, for nothing that year, that fall of 2017. But a lot of that was ongoing that whole season, and then there was a dismissal of the head coach. So Dave's first year was really rough. There was a lot going on. And then not too much longer, maybe once he thinks he's going to get his feet under him, a year or two later, then COVID hits. And COVID may for Dave, and I'm not speaking for him, I've never spoken to him about this, but when everything kind of goes on pause for a period of time, I think that may have been a reset opportunity for him and really probably in alignment with the university and President Robbins and everybody in the athletic department having to come on board with a reentry plan and navigating all the hoops of the financial burden of no revenues from ticket sales and donations being significantly decreased that year. I think David responded pretty well, is my point, these last couple of years, and maybe this last year or so, handling the conference realignment, getting Arizona into the Big 12, how quickly he moved on, getting Coach Brennan here. I mean, maybe some of Dave's finer moments really came here at the end, but legacies and tenures always kind of get measured over the long term. And as we look to the future, I think for Arizona, there's a changing landscape. I mean, the landscape has changed so much in Dave's tenure. I mean, from 2017 to where we are now, it's going to change even more in the next 5 years. So the next athletic director hire is going to be interesting and a critical one for the athletics department.
You know, Shane and I didn't talk about this in the first segment, Blair, but a name that's been out there, and I actually had a friend who used to work at Fox Sports with John Entz. I know Jason Scheer put the name out there, really was high on him and just said, this is the guy. He's a former team manager under Lute Olson. This is a guy that makes a lot of sense, and he loves Arizona. And I think for me, in hiring another athletic director, I wouldn't object to having somebody with Arizona ties. And we know there's a lot of people out there that, you know, Mac Rhodes at Baylor and Chris Del Conte at Texas, Mark Harlan at Utah that have Arizona ties, but a lot of those guys probably aren't coming. Do you have a name or names that you kind of favor as the future AD?
No, but I really don't have a name in particular. But what I do hit on, Eric, is what you just said. I mean, John Entz, somebody from that type of background, you know, whether it's the entertainment industry, television, broadcast. You know, I believe he has some time in professional baseball. Somebody that has that type of business acumen, and not just business in the sense of running a business, but the sense of how entertainment and business and operations all kind of collide, I think is important. But really tying the bow to that is the fundraising element. I mean, fundraising's always been important. And you know, I think Greg Byrne, I mean, when he first came to Arizona, you know, tried to make fundraising even more of a priority than it had ever been at Arizona. Kind of, you know, 10 years later, 12 years later from the time when Greg started now, we're in financial times that are different than they've probably ever been at this level of, you know, whether it was Pac-12, Big 12, Big 10. I mean, you just look at the divide across the country of major college athletic departments, and in that financial piece of it is so significant now. And whether it's, you know, Dave Heeke, you know, Greg Byrne, whether, you know, it was Rich Rodriguez as a football coach, Kevin Sumlin, you know, different leaders sort of sometimes are preferred by different segments of the booster population. You know, some that kind of have their guy and they're always going to support them, and as soon as their guy's out, you know, they're gonna pull their support back, and someone else is going to put their support behind their guy. I actually think that Arizona might be in a situation with some consistency with Tommy Lloyd in basketball, a guy that a lot of people seem to like. I think Brent Brennan's going to be very likable. I think there's a lot of motivation for people maybe rallying this donor base, and whether that's season ticket holders or the big time boosters. I think we need somebody to come in here that can kind of rally everybody together and understand the landscape now, understand NIL, understand transfer portal, understand whatever Congress or the court systems, you know, pass on down to us. Is it student athletes becoming employees? You know, you need a new modern sort of way of thinking and handling all the issues that are taking place, but understanding how money is going to be a necessary driver for making those things possible. It's a different animal now. You know, my experience in an athletic department 5 years ago, and I was there for almost 15 years, is a different animal now. And so if the universities and in particular Arizona doesn't continue to adapt its leadership style, and if it doesn't adapt its approach to fundraising, it's going to be hard to survive. You hate to say that, but it's just going to be really hard to survive. So my priorities, I don't have a person in particular, Eric, but I think fundraising is very important. And I think somebody that's got a sense of business, entertainment, connecting with the modern fan, the modern, you know, person that's going to go spend disposable income to go watch events in person. There needs to be somebody that can connect with those people, because we got to get Arizona Stadium filled. We got to keep McHale Center filled. We got to keep High Corbett and Hillenbrand, those places filled. And it's going to take a pretty innovative leader for that.
All right, this one's going to be a tough one for you, but do the best you can with it. There have been rumors, obviously, of a budget shortfall and some cuts in the athletic department, including potentially sports. Just your thoughts. I don't want to have you name sports. I mean, because that's tough to say, you know, how do you prioritize which sports or whatnot? What do you personally expect to come from this? Do you think that the cuts will be major? In your personal opinion, minor? Just any thoughts you have on that?
Yeah, very naive perspective. You know, I don't have any inside information on this, but I would expect that the athletic department and the university will have support it as much as it can to not cut anything in the short term. That would be optimal. Longer term, maybe there's some considerations about what needs to be done longer term, and you have a major roadblock to that. A major roadblock being Title IX in terms of, you can't just go, let's take both tennis programs away, because it doesn't, and I'm just picking tennis because there's a men's team and a women's team. So you're proportionally going to have to work within Title IX in terms of the funding, the scholarships, and you're not just going to go tit for tat, is what I'm saying, because, well, even like in basketball, men's basketball has fewer scholarships than women's basketball. So even just looking at the sports, there's some, the proportions aren't always equal, men's and women's, because it has to align in with Title IX and the NCAA rules. I think you look at a sport like men's and women's swimming and diving. I mean, there's a huge facility cost there to maintain a pool. You have pretty large rosters. I don't know exactly what their scholarship counts are now, but again, I think if you're thinking long term of a sport that doesn't make the most financial sense for us to continue to support, maybe that's a sport like that. I don't know. I don't think the university wants to cut teams. They just added triathlon a year ago. But as you look at travel logistics with a new conference, not just, again, what the next, say, 5 years look like, but what are conferences going to look like, 10 years from now? I mean, I think there's a lot of long-term financial considerations that would go into cutting a sport. I don't think, and maybe it's just because I don't want to believe that there would be a quick reaction to cut a sport, because you're really not, in the big picture, talking about a lot of money short-term cutting a smaller Olympic sport. Long term, there may be some strategy there behind facility costs and other support and resources where it would add up and make some sense. But as a short-term reaction, I hope that's not the case right now.
Yeah, no, I agree with you, especially because, I mean, we have UVA alumni who have medaled in swim and dive, so it would be a shame to see that go. My last question for you, Blair, and it's a more fun one. We made our very early predictions for Arizona football going into next season. Eric's a little more optimistic than I am. The schedule came out earlier today as we're recording. How many wins do you see on there for Arizona?
Yeah, I was hoping you would ask me this, and I've tried to think about it today since that schedule came out. It's fun to see a new schedule and start thinking about fall of 2024. I can't make a prediction on the schedule because the roster is not complete. I mean, it's I'll retrace my steps a little bit to last year. I was optimistic coming off 5-7. I thought, okay, the defense showed a little bit of improvement at the end. I knew we were going to have a really good offense, so I was optimistic that Arizona could get, bowl eligible. And then I watched a spring practice or two, and we had Big Bill Norton was here, Tyler Manoa, Justin Flo on defense. We had a few more, bodies on the defensive side of the ball, and I thought, yeah, okay, it's still looking like we're progressing to a team that can go to a bowl game. We forget that after spring ball, it was at April or May, we got commitments from, Sio Nofanga Tatoa, a big defensive lineman from Indiana that transferred in. Taylor Upshaw, who had gone to Colorado for spring football. He then transferred down to Arizona. Those were a couple critical pieces of the defense as I saw it. And so I really didn't feel sold on our defense probably until, May, when I really started to look at what could the two deep look like. Do we have enough depth on the defensive line? Do we have enough depth at linebacker? It takes these rosters a long time to round out into form. Even 2 years ago, Jed brought in DJ Williams, a running back from the transfer portal very late over the summer. And it was almost one of those questions of, well, did we really need a running back at that time? And then, I actually think he's going to be one of the harder bodies for this team to replace on offense because of his impact in the fourth quarter of games. So, when I look at the schedule today, I don't know, because I don't know what the roster is going to look like. There's going to be players that have stayed with this team that are going to go through spring ball, and there's probably going to be some that want to transfer after spring ball. There's going to be an opportunity for players all around the country in April to transfer, and I would imagine Coach Brennan's staff's going to be very, aggressive and strategic in terms of getting some bodies in here they want. So I have to take a rain check on a prediction. On the surface, I feel good about everybody that's said they're coming back, led by Noah and T-Mac and Jacob Manu and those guys. But to say we're going to go 8-4 or 9-3 or, whatever it might be, I just can't do that today. There's too much of this roster to round out before I can make a good prediction on that. So I'm sorry to ruin that.
I'm going to put you on the spot for this last question then. Which is more likely to you? Which outcome is more likely? Arizona men's basketball makes the Final Four. Arizona baseball makes the College World Series at Omaha. Arizona softball makes it to Oklahoma City. Or Arizona football makes, not wins, but makes the Big 12 championship game.
Can I answer that one too when Blair's done?
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, that's a good question. I guess I probably am going to have to take, and this might be one of the harder ones to actually do because you got to do it in 2 weeks' time. But I might just take the basketball team because you can probably get hot for 4 games and get to the Final Four. I don't know a ton about the baseball and softball rosters yet. It's tough to get the World Series. I'm not sure about the pitching on both of those programs. And I think the Big 12 is going to be a little bit harder than most people are giving it credit for. I think it's going to be a dogfight to win that league. There's going to be 10 teams that can probably go to a bowl game next year. It's going to be hard to win that league. So I'll go Final Four because I still think this team's got 6 weeks to really get this thing clicked into gear this year.
Shane?
Yeah, Blair pretty much said everything I was going to say. Yeah, I agree. I think if Jed was still there with that roster, I think that it would be a very, very tough decision between football and basketball. But at this point, I think you have to go Final Four. And I'm not predicting it. Don't get me wrong, just because we've, hasn't happened since 2001, and it's just tough to get there. But I think that's the most likely scenario at this point. It is just, it's not easy, but it is simple. You get in and you win a few games. And that's how it has to happen. In football, I think it's less likely. Baseball and softball, I agree with Blair's assessment there. So yeah, probably men's hoops Final Four is the most likely out of the 4, even though I cringe when I say it because for reasons we've talked about.
Clean sweep without question. You know what I'm going to say? I think Blair said it best. You get hot at the right time. You win 4 games, you make the Final Four. We're not saying win the national championship. But football is a long season. It's 3.5 months before you'd make it to, or 3 full months before you'd make it to the championship game, and a lot of roster building to go. So Blair, great to catch up with you. I'm sure we'll have you on closer to spring ball. Give us your analysis of what you think, but off to a good start. So great catching up with you.
Thank you both.
Always fun to catch up with Blair, but now it's time to make some picks. So Shane, you and I struggled last week, 1-4 with our picks. Yeah. We will start with, we'll wait for the Arizona games. Pick a Pac-12 road win, unranked road win. Who you got?
Yeah, you took mine. I'm going to go Washington State over Washington. Cougars won 6 of their last 7, including that win over Arizona. So that's not looking like quite as bad a loss now. And Washington State's only loss in that stretch was at Cal in overtime. Washington's been more up and down, so give me the Cougars to win on the road.
I'm going Oregon over USC. Andy Enfield will not survive the offseason. He will be, as far as USC's coach, he will be replaced. Just a prediction. They'll bring in somebody else. All right, top 25 loss against an unranked team, Shane. Going Ole Miss beats number 16 Auburn later this week. What do you have?
That's a good one. I'm going to go Texas over barely ranked number 25 TCU. Texas just took Houston to overtime. I think they're going to get the job done at TCU. So, and I think Texas is worthy of being a ranked team as well.
Top 10 loss against an unranked team, going Nebraska to beat number 6 Wisconsin, but it's kind of tough because the top 10 teams play a lot of other top 10 teams this week, so the pickings are slim.
Not a lot to choose from, so I'm going to go big on this one, Eric. I'm going to take St. John's over number 1 UConn.
Wow, how about that?
St. John's is 8-2 at home. They just blew out Villanova, lost to by a point to Marquette before that. So what the heck? I'm going to take St. John's and take down number 1.
So Shane, if you remember, if you're out there and you remember, on Shane's birthday in October, Arizona played Washington State and won the game big. I can't even remember the score. It was so bad. Was it 44-6, something like that?
Yep.
Well, Thursday is my birthday, number 41. So let us hope that Stanford takes care of business. That Arizona takes care of business against Stanford. Stanford already took care of business up in the Bay Area. Let's hope Arizona.
Don't they have Cal first? Isn't the Cal game on Thursday?
I thought Stanford was, but you know what?
Let me take a look.
You're right. It is Cal. Cal's right. Sorry, I had it backwards.
No worries.
Let's hope that Cal.
They better beat Cal on your birthday, dude. Yeah.
All right. So how many you got? How many you got Arizona by?
Oh, just because Arizona likes to make things interesting. I'll take Arizona by a dozen against Cal. They should beat them by more than that, but I say that Cal it's one of those classic games that should be a little more interesting than it should be.
All right, I actually kind of agree with you. I'm saying Arizona by 14. I mean, this was a team, I think Arizona won by 18, but they dominated in the first half.
Yeah.
In the earlier matchup. I think they win by 14 here. I don't think they will cover the spread because I think the spread will probably be somewhere in the 18-point range, something like that. Now, on Saturday, you have Stanford it's Sunday night, Stanford at Arizona. Kind of interesting that Arizona plays the rare Sunday game. This is a revenge angle. Do you think Arizona can beat Stanford by more than Stanford beat Arizona by last time, which was 18?
I think it's gonna be around that much. Yeah, Stanford's not gonna shoot as well on the road. Arizona's gonna be PO'd after that game. They're gonna be focused enough. I think they win by about 20.
Wow. Okay,
Yep.
You're more optimistic than me. I say Arizona by 15. Probably won't cover the spread there either, but I think Arizona wins both of these games. I mean, this is the easiest weekend that Arizona has left. I mean, this is no question about that. You cannot struggle with either one of these teams, Shane. You must take care of business.
Five of their next 7 games, I believe, are at home. The only 2 on the road or at the mountain schools. They get a split there. They win their 5 games at home. That's 6 out of 7, 7 out of 8 overall. There's no reason they shouldn't be in that situation.
Let us hope. All right. Well, thanks to Blair Willis for joining us. Always great to catch up with him. For Shane Dale, I'm Eric Cohen. Thanks for listening. And as always, bear down.